Some fathers find out their son is drowning in debt. I found out my daughter had erased me from her own wedding photos before I ever knew there was a wedding, and that discovery gutted me worse than any phone call ever could. You want to know what it feels like to build a life around three people and watch two of them decide you were never really part of it? Let me tell you. It feels like standing in your garage at 11 o'clock at night, staring at a phone screen that's gone dark, wondering if the daughter you raised alone for 19 years even remembers your birthday anymore. That was me, 63 years old, a grown man with calloused hands and a bad knee, sitting on an overturned bucket because I couldn't make myself go back inside to the quiet. My name is Walter Kensley. Folks around Tulsa know me as the guy who owns Kensley Fence and Rail, 3 trucks, a small crew, and 31 years of putting up split rail and chain link for half the ranches and backyards in this county. I built that business out of a rusted-out pickup and a roll of wire back when I was 29, right after my wife Donna passed from a fever that hit her hard and fast and left me alone with a 4-year-old girl named Bethany and a boy, Cole, who was barely 2. I never remarried. People asked me why for years. Truth is, I didn't trust myself to split my attention. I'd already lost the person who was supposed to help me raise those kids, and I wasn't about to risk giving either one of them less than everything I had left. So I coached Bethany's softball team even though I didn't know a thing about softball when I started. I taught Cole to change his own oil before he could drive. I sat up with fevers. I sat through recitals. I sat in a folding chair at every graduation this side of the county line. I made myself a promise the night Donna died, standing in a hospital hallway with a nurse asking me if there was anyone she could call. There wasn't anyone. So the promise was simple. These two would never once feel like they were raising themselves. I kept that promise for 26 years. And then, on a Thursday in early June, I found out just how little that promise had meant to one of them. Welcome to the channel. Stick around, because the folks in this story had every opportunity to do right by the man who raised them, and they chose something else entirely. If you've got a minute, hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight. I read every one of them. It started, like most of these things do, with something small and stupid. Cole called me on a Tuesday, said he'd seen something on Facebook that didn't sit right with him and he figured I should know before I heard it some other way. I told him just to say it plain, and he got quiet for a second, the way he does when he's working up the nerve to hand you bad news. Bethany's engaged, he said. Has been for a while, looks like. And there's more, Dad. There's a wedding page. Save the date's already gone out. It's in 3 weeks. I sat with the phone against my ear for a long moment before I said anything. 3 weeks. My daughter, my only girl, the one I taught to ride a bike in the Kroger parking lot because our driveway had too much gravel, was getting married in 3 weeks, and I was finding out from her brother, secondhand, off a website. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe she'd tried to call, and the message hadn't gone through. Maybe it was a mix-up, some digital hiccup, and she'd been meaning to drive over and tell me in person, the way we'd always done things in this family. I've never been a man who assumes the worst of his own blood, not right away. So I called her. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail, that same recording she'd had for years, cheerful and a little rushed, telling whoever was calling to leave a message and she'd get back to them. I left one. Kept my voice light, the way you do when you don't want the worry showing through the cracks. Hey, sweetheart, it's Dad. Cole mentioned something about an engagement and I wanted to hear it from you. Give me a call when you get a minute. Nothing that day. Nothing the next. By Thursday, I'd called 4 times. I sat in my truck outside a job site in Bixby, engine running, air conditioning, fighting the July heat, and I dialed her number a 5th time with my thumb actually shaking a little, which is not a thing that happens to me. I've pulled cattle out of barbed wire with my bare hands. I don't shake. But I was shaking that afternoon in that truck, because some part of me had already started doing the math on what kind of silence this actually was. I went and found the wedding website myself that night, sitting at my kitchen table with my reading glasses pushed up on my nose, scrolling through it slow, my heart going a little sideways with every photo. There was Bethany in a sundress at some vineyard somewhere, laughing at a man I'd never once met. There was a registry. There was a countdown clock ticking away in the corner of the screen like it was mocking me personally. And, down at the bottom, under a section called Our Story, There was a paragraph about how she'd been raised by her wonderful mother and her incredible stepfather, a man named Russell, who had, and I'm quoting this because I read it enough times to have it memorized, always been there for her when it counted most. I don't have a wife anymore. Donna's been gone 26 years. There is no stepfather in this family, wonderful or otherwise. I read that sentence maybe a dozen times trying to figure out if I was misunderstanding something, if there was some other Bethany Kensley getting married at a vineyard in Missouri that week. There wasn't. It was my daughter. And in her own words, on a page she built herself, the man who raised her didn't exist. I want you to understand something about that moment, because it matters for everything that came after. I didn't call her screaming. I didn't drive over there that night and pound on a door. What I did was sit very still at that kitchen table for close to an hour, staring at a countdown clock counting down to a wedding I apparently wasn't invited to, in a family story that apparently didn't include me at all. I called her one more time before I went to bed. Voicemail again. This time I didn't leave a message. There wasn't anything left to say into a recording. The next morning, Cole came by the shop before his shift at the plant. He does that sometimes, drops in for coffee before work, and I could tell by the way he was standing in the doorway, hands jammed in his pockets, that he already knew what I'd found. "You saw the website," he said. It wasn't a question. "I saw it," I said. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Dad, I don't know what to tell you. She's been weird about you for a couple years now. Ever since Mom's sister passed and left her that house money. I think she got some ideas in her head from Russell about, I don't know, starting fresh or something. I told her it was messed up, leaving you out of the story like that. She didn't want to hear it." "Is he invited?" I asked. "This Russell." Cole looked at me like the answer was obvious and painful at the same time. "Dad, he's walking her down the aisle. I want to tell you I saw that coming, but I didn't. Not really. I'd co-signed Bethany's first car loan when she was 22 because her credit was thin and the bank wouldn't touch her alone. I still had my name on the title of the little bungalow she'd bought 4 years back because the mortgage broker needed a second income on paper to make the numbers work, and I was the only family she had who could vouch for her. I paid the property taxes on that house every single year without her even asking, because I knew her paycheck at the dental office barely covered the mortgage itself, and I wasn't about to let my daughter lose her home over $4,000 a year that meant nothing to me and everything to her. And a man she'd been with for maybe 14 months was going to walk her down the aisle while I sat, presumably somewhere in the back if I was invited at all, erased from her own story, like I'd never coached her softball team, never sat up with her through chicken pox, never once missed a single thing in 19 years of raising her by myself. I drove to her house that afternoon, didn't call ahead. Some part of me needed to see her face when she explained it, because a man deserves that much after 26 years of showing up. Her car was in the driveway. I knocked. It took a long minute before the door opened, and when it did, Bethany stood there in workout clothes, hair pulled back, phone still in her hand like she'd been in the middle of something, and her face did a thing I'll never forget. It didn't light up the way it used to when I showed up unannounced with a pizza on a Friday night when she was a teenager. It went tight, guarded, like I was a bill collector she'd been avoiding. "Dad," she said, "what are you doing here? Not hi, not come in. What are you doing here?" Like I was a stranger who'd wandered onto her porch. "I saw your wedding website," I said. I kept my voice even though my chest felt like somebody had wrapped a chain around it and was slowly pulling it tight. 3 weeks, Bethany. I found out from your brother." She crossed her arms, and behind her, in the front hallway, I saw a man step into view, tall, tanned, wearing the kind of golf shirt that costs more than it has any business costing, a coffee mug in his hand like he lived there, which I supposed by then he did. "This is Russell," she said, not quite looking at me. "My fiancé." "I know who he is," I said. "I read about him on your website, where I apparently don't exist." Her jaw did the thing it used to do when she was 15 and getting caught in something. "Dad, don't make this a whole thing." "A whole thing," I said. "Sweetheart, I'm your father." And that's when Russell spoke up, easy and smooth like a man who'd rehearsed this exact moment, standing there in my daughter's front hallway with his coffee mug and his golf shirt. "Look," he said, "we didn't want to make it complicated. Beth's told me you two have had a strained relationship for a while. We figured it was easier to keep the day focused on the people who've really been there. I have never in my life wanted to put my fist through a man's teeth the way I wanted to in that exact second. But I didn't. That's not who I am. And my own father never got the chance to teach me how to be anybody else, so I had to figure out for myself, standing on that porch, exactly how a man holds himself together when his whole chest is caving in. Strained, I said, looking at my daughter now, not him. Is that what you told him? Strained? Bethany's eyes filled up, but her voice stayed hard. Dad, you smother me. You've always smothered me. Every time something good happens in my life, you're there wanting credit for it, wanting to know every detail, wanting to be part of it. I just wanted one thing, one wedding that felt like it was mine, not yours. I paid for your car, I said quietly. I'm on the title of this house. I've paid your property taxes for 4 years running so you wouldn't lose it. And there it was. Her whole face changed, and not for the better. See, she said, this is exactly what I mean. Everything comes back to what you've paid for. I can't just have a relationship with you, Dad. It's always a transaction. I stood there on that porch with my daughter telling me 26 years of showing up amounted to a transaction, while a man I'd met 90 seconds earlier sipped coffee in her hallway like he was waiting for a table at a restaurant. And I felt something in my chest go very quiet and very still, the way the woods go quiet right before a storm actually breaks. I'm not invited to the wedding, am I? I said. It wasn't really a question by that point. Bethany looked at the floor. It's just, we kept the guest list small. Immediate family only, and Russell's side. I am your immediate family, I said. I am the only immediate family you have ever had. She didn't have an answer for that. Russell did, though. He set his coffee mug down on the little table by the door and said, with a patience that made my skin crawl, Mr. Kensley, I think it might be best if you gave Beth some space to enjoy this time in her life. This kind of stress isn't good for a bride 3 weeks out. I looked at that man for a long moment. Then I looked at my daughter one more time, hoping, I suppose, that some part of the girl who used to fall asleep in my truck after softball practice, head against the window, completely trusting that her daddy would get her home safe, might surface and say something different. She didn't. She just stood there with her arms crossed, waiting for me to leave her own porch. So I left. I didn't say another word. I got back in my truck, and I drove home, and I want to tell you I cried the whole way, but I didn't. I didn't feel much of anything at first. That came later, in waves, the way real grief does. What I felt in that truck was something closer to clarity. Cold and quiet and absolute. I called Cole from my driveway before I even went inside. Told him everything, word for word, the transaction comment and all. He went quiet on the line for a long time. Dad, he finally said, I'm sorry. I should have warned you harder. I didn't think she'd actually go through with cutting you out like that. It's not your fault, son, I told him, and I meant it. Cole had never once, in 28 years, made me feel like an obligation. He called on Sundays. He showed up when his truck needed work and stayed to help me with mine. He was the son who never once treated love like it came with an invoice. I went inside that night, and I sat in my recliner in the dark for a long time, the television off, just sitting with it, 26 years. Every softball practice on a diamond 45 minutes away, because that's where the good league was. Every stitch of every Halloween costume. Sewn by my own 2 hands because we couldn't afford the store-bought kind, and I wasn't about to let my girl show up in something half as good as the other kids had. Every year of property taxes on a house I'd never once asked to have my name attached to, except that the bank required it, and I loved her enough not to make her feel the weight of that requirement. And in her own words, to a man she'd known just over a year, all of that came down to a transaction. I didn't sleep that night. Around 2 in the morning, I got up, made coffee I didn't drink, and sat at that same kitchen table where I'd read her wedding website, and I let myself ask the question that had been circling since the porch. Where did I go wrong? I didn't have an answer that night, but somewhere around dawn, watching the sky go gray outside my kitchen window, something in my chest settled into a decision I didn't have words for yet, though I knew, even then, that the man who walked into that house the night before wasn't the same one who was going to walk out of it that morning. The wedding came and went 3 weeks later, exactly as scheduled. I know because Cole went, sat in the back like the family black sheep, and called me that night, voice tight with something between anger and heartbreak on my behalf. Said Russell gave a toast thanking Bethany's mother, God rest her, and her stepfather Russell for the life they'd given her. Said not one person in that room said my name all night, and half the guests who knew our family at all kept looking around, confused, wondering where I was. I didn't ask for details beyond that. I didn't need them. What I did the following Monday was call my attorney, a woman named Carol Fenwick, who's handled Kensley fence and rails contracts for going on 18 years, and who I trust with things a lot more sensitive than fence permits. Carol, I said, when she picked up, I need my name off my daughter's mortgage, and I need to know what it takes to have my name removed from her car title, and I need it done clean and done right. There was a pause on her end, the kind a good lawyer gives you when she wants to make sure you've thought this all the way through. Walter, she said, you've held that mortgage co-signature for 4 years. You sure you want to pull it now? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I told her. She didn't argue with me further. By Wednesday, the paperwork was moving. Turns out, when you're the co-signer on a mortgage and you withdraw, the bank doesn't just shrug and let the loan ride along fine without you. They reassess the whole thing based on the primary borrower's income alone, and Bethany's income at that dental office, on its own, without my name propping it up, didn't come close to qualifying for that loan anymore. Carol explained it to me plain. Once my name came off, the bank had 90 days to require refinancing under Bethany's income alone, or the loan would be called due in full. I let that happen exactly the way the paperwork said it would. I didn't call to warn her. She'd made it clear on her own porch that my involvement in her life was a transaction she resented, so I decided to let the actual transactions speak for themselves. Next, I called the title company that had handled her car loan and formally removed my name from the co-signature thereto, effective immediately per the original loan agreement's terms. Her interest rate, it turned out, had been favorable specifically because of my credit backing it. Without me on the paper, the lender flagged the loan for review within 30 days. I didn't do any of it with anger driving me. I want to be clear about that, because I know how this can sound to somebody hearing it secondhand. I didn't do it to punish her. I did it because a man who's told, to his face, on his own daughter's porch, that his entire relationship with his child amounts to a transaction, eventually has to decide whether he's going to keep making payments on a relationship that only runs one direction. The property taxes I let lapse too. Simple as that. I just stopped paying them. County sent the bill to the address on file, which was still her house, and for the first time in 4 years, Bethany found out exactly what her mortgage and her taxes actually cost without her father quietly absorbing the difference every single year. I heard about all of it through Cole, same as I'd heard about the engagement in the first place. Said Bethany had called him in a panic about 6 weeks after the wedding. Said the bank was demanding she refinance or find a co-signer within 90 days. Said the car dealership had sent a notice about her loan too. Said the county had sent a tax bill she genuinely did not know existed because she'd never once had to think about it before. She thinks it's a mistake, Cole told me. She thinks the bank messed something up. Tell her to call me if she wants to understand it, I said. I'm not hiding from anything. She called 4 days later. First time I'd heard her voice since that porch. It came out thin and scared in a way I hadn't heard from my daughter since she was small enough to be afraid of thunderstorms. Dad, there's something wrong with my mortgage, she said. The bank's saying I have to refinance in 90 days or they're calling the loan. And my car, they're saying the same thing. And the county sent me a tax bill for $4,000 I've never gotten before. What is going on? Nothing's wrong, I told her, keeping my voice level, almost gentle, the way I would with a spooked animal. I withdrew as co-signer on your mortgage and your car loan 5 weeks ago. And I stopped covering your property taxes, since that was never actually my obligation to begin with. It was always yours. I just never let you feel the weight of it before. Dead silence on the line for a long moment. You did what? Why would you do that? Dad, I can't qualify for either of those on my own income. You know that. You told me our relationship was a transaction, I said, so I stopped making payments on it. Dad, please, she said, and I heard something crack open in her voice, something that sounded almost like the daughter I remembered. You have to call them back. Tell them it was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, Bethany, I said. I'll let you go now. I hung up the phone, And I sat there in my kitchen for a long while after, and I won't pretend it didn't cost me something to do that. It did. It cost me plenty. But there's a particular kind of quiet that settles over a man once he stops absorbing consequences that were never his to carry in the first place, and that quiet, as much as it hurt, felt more honest than anything I'd felt in months. She didn't manage to refinance. Her income alone, plus a man who apparently kept his own finances, entirely separate from hers, didn't come close to the bank's requirements. I heard, secondhand again, that Russell wasn't exactly rushing to put his own name on her mortgage or her car loan, which told me something about that relationship that I suspect Bethany was only just then beginning to understand herself. She lost the house within 4 months, had to sell it in a hurry to avoid foreclosure, walked away with next to nothing after the fees and the rushed sale price, and moved into a rental with Russell on the other side of town. The car got repossessed 2 weeks after that, the dealership having found the loan unsecured and Bethany 3 payments behind by then, since the county tax lien had eaten into whatever savings she'd had left. She showed up at my shop on a Tuesday afternoon in October, driving a car that wasn't hers, borrowed from a coworker, face pale, eyes swollen from crying that had clearly been going on for a while before she ever pulled into my lot. "How could you do this to me?" she said, standing in my own garage bay, voice shaking. "I lost my house, Dad. I lost my car. Do you understand what you've done to my life?" "I understand exactly what's happened," I said. My voice was steady, empty of the anger I might have expected to feel, and didn't. "You told me our relationship was a transaction, and that you didn't need me hovering over your life anymore. I took you at your word." "That's not what I meant," she said, and now she was crying in earnest, the kind of crying I hadn't seen from her since she was small. "I didn't mean stop existing. I didn't mean walk away from everything." "You didn't invite me to your wedding," I said. "You told a room full of people that a man you'd known 14 months was the one who'd always been there for you. You erased 26 years off a website like it never happened. I'm not the one who decided our relationship didn't count for anything, sweetheart. You decided that. I just stopped pretending otherwise." She stood there in that garage bay for a long time, and I watched something shift across her face, something that looked less like anger now and more like a person finally doing the math on a bill she'd been avoiding. "Where's Russell?" I asked, mostly because I already suspected the answer. "He left," she said quietly. "Once the money got tight. Once he figured out he wasn't marrying somebody with a paid-off house and no debt. He said he needed space to figure some things out. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't need to. Some lessons arrive with their own conclusion attached, and a father doesn't have to add commentary to a truth that's already standing right in front of his daughter, in the shape of an empty apartment, and a man who vanished the second things got difficult. I let her cry it out standing right there in my shop, same way I'd have let her cry it out at my kitchen table when she was 9 years old and had scraped her knee falling off her bike. But I didn't reach for my checkbook, and I want you to understand what that cost me, because reaching for my checkbook has been the only language I've ever really known how to speak when it comes to that girl. "I'm not going to fix this one, Bethany," I told her, once she'd quieted some. "Not the house, not the car, not any of it. You're going to have to build your own foundation this time, the way I built mine. Nobody handed me a single thing when your mother died. I earned every bit of what I gave you, and I gave it to you freely, and you told me it meant nothing except what it cost." She didn't have an answer for that. She got back in her borrowed car and drove away, and I stood in that garage bay for a long time after, listening to the sound of the engine fade off down the road, feeling something in my chest that wasn't quite peace yet, but was closer to it than anything I'd felt since that wedding website first loaded up on my kitchen table. I went to see Carol again the following week, and this time it wasn't about mortgages or car titles. "I want to update my will," I told her, sliding my coffee aside so she could spread her folder out on the table between us. She looked up at me over her glasses, same careful expression she'd worn the day I asked her to pull my name off Bethany's mortgage. "How completely?" she asked. "Cole gets the business," I said. "All of it, the trucks, the equipment, the client contracts, free and clear. He's earned every bit of that showing up for me the way he has. And the house, once I'm gone, goes to him too." "And Bethany?" Carol asked, pen hovering over the page. I sat with that question longer than I expected to. 26 years is a long habit to break in a single sentence. $1, I finally said. $1, specifically, so nobody can claim later that she was simply forgotten. She wasn't forgotten. She was remembered, and this was the decision that came out of that remembering. Carol didn't ask me to reconsider. She made the note and got to work. Months passed after that. Cole told me, every now and then, that Bethany was working 2 jobs now, renting a small 1-bedroom on the north side of town. No Russell in sight, no wedding website, no vineyard photos. Learning, the hard way, what a life actually costs when nobody's name but your own is holding it up. I won't tell you it doesn't ache some nights. It does. There are evenings I sit on my back porch, coffee gone cold in my hand, watching the sun go down over the same yard where I taught 2 kids to ride bikes on gravel that never did get properly graded. And I think about a girl who used to fall asleep against my shoulder at church because she trusted, completely and without question, that her daddy would carry her the rest of the way home if she got tired. But then I remember that porch. I remember a man in a golf shirt telling me it might be best if I gave my own daughter some space. I remember a wedding website that gave credit for 26 years of my life to a stranger who lasted 14 months before he ran the second the money got difficult. And the ache settles back down to where it belongs. Cole still comes by most Sundays. We sit out back, and he tells me about the plant. And I tell him about whatever fence jobs got me cussing that week, and some evenings that's the whole conversation, and it's enough. It's more than enough, actually. I spent so many years measuring what I'd built by how much of it I could hand off to my children someday, that I nearly missed the fact that one of them had been standing right beside me the entire time, showing up without ever once being asked to, while the other one was busy deciding I only mattered as far as my checkbook could reach. My father passed when I was young enough that I barely remember his voice. I spent my whole life trying to be the kind of father he never had the chance to be. And, somewhere in all that trying, I built a daughter who looked at everything I'd given her and called it a transaction. Maybe that's on me, somewhere in the mix. I've turned that thought over plenty of nights, out there on that porch with the coffee going cold, but a man can only carry so much responsibility for a choice that wasn't his to make. She's the one who erased 26 years off a web page. She's the one who stood on her own porch and told her father to leave. I didn't erase her back. I just stopped paying for a relationship that had already decided, on its own, that I wasn't really part of the family story. And if she ever wants to write me back into it, honestly, for real, not because the bank came calling, my door's still standing right where it's always been. But I'm done being anybody's invisible signature. Some things a man only figures out at 63, sitting alone on a porch that used to be full of noise. Better late, I suppose, than never figuring it out at all. If this one hit close to home for you, I'd like to hear about it. Drop a comment, let me know where you're listening from tonight. And if you've got a story like mine, I read every single one. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on the next one.